Wet-Togetherness. Bodies exceed humanity. They remind us that we are part of something vaster and smaller, more complex, more connected than our mere existence as an atomized species. Our bodies, and bodies in general, are composed out of heterogeneity and multitudes. All bodies are wet collective bodies, defined by how they link to other bodies, places, environments, technologies. Think of breathing, clogging, decomposing, discharging, flushing, lubricating, melting, menstruating, transfusing. Bodies exist as trans and extra-territorial beings. They live in hybridity. This porous condition produces a planetary wet-togetherness, a commoning force that constitutes all bodies as collective hydro subjects. Wet-togetherness is a collaboration between e-flux and the 13th Shanghai Biennale, Bodies of Water, 水体. It is a series of 9 sound pieces in which a selection of Biennale contributors enact aqueousness through sound. Episode 2. Decomposing. Organic bodies break down and decay, aided by other bodies. As microorganisms feed on dead plants and animal-human remains, they deconstruct intricate life forms into their simplest components. Water, carbon dioxide, and nutrients are building blocks of earth beings and their socio-natural collectives. We are in a continuous process of body breaking and making. The following conversation is recorded between Daisy Bisenieks and Royce from the artist collective Zheng Mahler and Wang.
My name is Wang, and I lived and worked in Beijing. In recent years, I have spent a lot of time in my hometown, Changchun, with my parents and my childhood friends. In October 2017, having lived in the United States for 5 years, I decided to return to China. Because I realized that although New York may have been the center of the world, or at least many people believed so, it was not a center for me. My center was somewhere that I have left behind. And having seen all these different landscapes, sometimes all I wanted was to go back to the miry, scorched, remote land and listen to the dialect and the vernacular I once left there. My original dialect and vernacular is Northeastern Mandarin. The language evolved from the fusion of Manchu and Han culture during the Qing dynasty, and many of its Manchu pronunciations have survived to this day. Northeastern Mandarin is known in the Chinese language system for being lively and full of humor, and as such, it is often considered one of the most suitable language for Chinese-style comedy performances. My Northeastern accent is not considered heavy among Northeasterners, which probably has to do with the sense of alienation from the Northeast culture that I had felt as a kid. But when I speak anywhere outside the Northeast, my identity reveals itself inadvertently and is instantly recognizable. Sometimes alienation creates the true emotional bond with the subject one observes. For me, the alienation from English was even more pronounced. After all those years in the US, completely immersed in the English-speaking context, I still fail to think in English. Whenever I want to express something, the meaning always instantly goes through a process of translation in my mind. In other words, a foreign word or concept, to me, is naturally fragmented and disconstructed. In Chinese, pictograms are the basis of the language system, so that when you think of a word, it appears in your mind as an image, and this image may refer to a series of actions or states. Perhaps the image that a word conjures in your mind is closer to its essence. Decomposing is a compound word, but what does it mean? We might break it down into several parts, like a deco, arm, pose, and sing. This is something like an arm chanting with a decorative gesture to me. Arm chanting was originally a practice of communication between man and his environment through the vibration that resonates between the physical body and the external aura, achieving something similar to the Chinese philosophy of celestial unity, the unity of heaven and man. Within the context of deco, arm, pose, sing, the celestial unity takes on a decorative gesture. This is perhaps a not uncommon historical state in itself. In one of my previous works, Symptomatic Silence of Complicit Forgetting, a piece that dealt with the lingering and evolving trauma of China's Cultural Revolution on personal histories, I referred to a particular form of forgetting formulated by the German scholar Aleida Aschmann. In her essay, Forms of Forgetting, according to whom, when the system attempts to destroy a part of the history or memory from the past, its victims would often exhibit silence symptomatically. Their compounded silence becomes a kind of complicity. The people and the system, in their modes of interactions, had become to a tacit agreement on how to deal with the trauma of history. Everything seems appeased. The sinkholes in the historical narrative are smoothed out and reintegrated thanks to the tacit agreement. And eventually, the victims and perpetrators have consulted with each other in empathies. This is a kind of a celestial unity with a decorative gesture. Northeast Strategy is an ongoing project that I have been focusing on for the past few years, and one of the reasons why I have returned to China and spent most of my time in Changchun in recent years. In Changchun, where I was born and raised, there is a shadow, a sinkhole left behind by the history, about which I already heard from the tales my grandparents told. It is the siege of Changchun in 1948 during the Chinese Civil War. Also the main historical context for my work, Tongas. The third chapter in Northeast Strategy presented in this exhibition. Few people seem to remember this history of mass starvation. I imagine the immense possibilities of that protracted state of hunger suffered in the midst of opposing ideologies. Perhaps it is precisely at the threshold of a fading consciousness, through starvation, that one comes close to the truth of the ideological confrontations that have accompanied the entirety of human civilization. Like the experience of Li Zhuowu, as expressed in the film through the lines of the elderly scholar who is dying in the besieged city. Extreme hunger made him experience the despair of ideological boundaries, and it is only one starves that one realizes that there is no difference between Confucianism and Taoism. Perhaps hunger is an opportunity for the enlightenment, just as Siddhartha Gautama became enlightened under the Bodhi tree. During the research phase of this work, I walked around the empty area surrounding the city of Changchun, which was once a circular zone with Kuomintang garrison in the inner circle, the communist forces besieging the city in the outer circle, and the uncountable civilians trapped inside the circles with no room to advance nor retreat. This emptied circle is now replaced by bustling shop centers and flyovers, like those uncountable bodies in history, decaying, decomposing, and reintegrated into the soil. All the sinkholes of the history are slowly smoothed out, eventually leaving a decorative celestial unity.
We are Zheng Moller, an anthropologist Daisy Bisenieks, and an artist Royce. We make work which deals with the intersections of transnational trade and aesthetics, examining the animal, non-human and more than human subjectivities which become entangled in webs of migration and exchange. When we think of the sound of decomposing, it is the sound of fungi, of mycelium. We spent the weekends of the wet seasons in Lanto search for mushrooms, which fruits after the rain. How might we feel to describe the sound of mycelium, of fungi? It might be a silent, wet, creeping, moving, cutting and enmeshing, splitting into strands, then reconvening. But again, we describe its passage, its movement, not its actual sound. How can one describe sound without resorting to onomatopoeia? One must conjure a sound through osmosis, make it appear from nowhere, invent it. What would it be exactly, precisely? It is the sound of a root, like a vein, pushing through grains of soil, so. That would be the sound of granules pushing against each other. Would that be the sound of rocks? The microbial echoes, above 20 keys, beyond human hearing, resonating at an ultrasonic pitch which only bats, mice and dolphins can hear ... so. Can an animal hear the sound of plants growing, of mushrooms fruiting, of organic matter decomposing? And how would they describe that sound? Obviously in the terms of sounds we can comprehend, or perhaps at this level. You don't hear sound, you feel it, you feel the vibrations. All sound is vibrations in the air. It is the sound of excited electrons moving around through a medium. It's all vibrations in the same way as if you hold a speaker to a glass of water, suddenly you see the sound. Seeing the unheard, hearing the unseeable. Under 20 A's, above 20 kh. Again, do we feel the vibrations of fungi which moves earth, which moves the air, which vibrates the drum in our ears? We can imagine the air, thick with the spores of fungi, communicating, sharing, forming networks, latching onto the hind legs of passing animals and dispersing. The sound of decomposing for us is the sound of humidity, of damp, the smell of earth and mushrooms as those threaded webs spread beneath the surface of the ground and begin eating away at organic matter. consuming its essence and extracting its worth, reconstituting life into new forms of life, which become billions of life. There is more fungal life and diversity in a handful of soil than all the plant and animal species on the planet. While recycling matter, the mushrooms fruit and flush at night, bursting like a mushroom cloud. The shape of the atomic explosion is no accident. It replicates the shape of the mushroom for a reason. I have become death, destroyer of worlds, but also the giver of life. Decomposing is a positive force. And we walk through the grass, gnats biting at our ankles, with our hands behind our backs, looking at the ground, looking for mushrooms. The best places to look are fallen, rotten logs, and in the dried and crusted mounds of cow dung, where pannulus janssens burst forth. But the wood here is also choice, growing in clusters on the side of branches, and again, those rotting logs. Pick them and pickle them, repeat the process of fermentation which gave life in the first place and begin the cycle again. Eat, digest with those bacteria which break down the foods, shit them, and eventually they become earth and water again to feed the next cycle of decomposition. We wait to consume the psilocin, that phantasmagoric molecule which agonizes the serotonin receptors and creates feelings of oneness, walking through the environment while high on the mushrooms fed by that very same environment. One becomes one with that environment and lets it over one. It undulates, stretches, pixelates, shifts and jumps. Vision becomes sound and sound becomes vision. On one day we will die and become soil and decompose again. Decomposition is around us everywhere. In a tropical environment, the natural state is entropy, and life is an endless and futile game, an attempt to halt its progress. The ground is pregnant, in moving through the tall grass. We pass an abandoned village, with dried cow dung and banyan trees wrapped around its architectures. It too is in a process of decomposition, first becoming ruins, eventually forests, then earth again. We pass the stream which flows and moistens the earth, drawing it downwards towards its flowing trajectory, and your skin too. Most of all you feel it on your skin, that absorbs the heat, and turns you into a puddle of sweat which drips. The sweat travels between the crevices in your limbs and evaporates into the air to become more moisture, dripping, wetness, melting, molasses, flowing into the soil, rotting like fruit, fermentation and mold, bacteria eating away, consuming and making anew, blood and bone that births new life, cycles of life, return, 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 becoming soil, becoming earth, becoming liquid, form to formlessness, disintegrating into a million pieces, unseen but reabsorbed into the ground. We are contributing to the Biennale with 3 interconnected works. The first is A Season in Shell, which is a relational account of our interactions with a Somali businessman in Hong Kong who devised a trading route for Somali abalone to the seafood restaurants of Kowloon by retraining fishermen in the Red Sea to collect the delicacy, which in the local community was worthless. We produced rather than represented this novel trade regime by diverting to tons of the abalone shells, whose nacre or mother of pearl was used in Swiss watches, to a museum of Switzerland and implicated the museum and the Swiss public in the value-added chains that begin at the bottom of the sea. The second work is Mutual Aid, which followed the shells to the mountains of Switzerland to trace the history of the use of abalone shells as a decorative material in a landlocked nation. But what we found instead was the remnants of anarchist watchmakers in who organized their watchmaking and atomized their division of labor to implicate all members of their communities who collectively shared the profits. It just so happened that these watchmakers were producing watches for the Chinese market by the 19th century, a legacy of the Kangxi Emperor's obsession with European watches, one of the only objects or materials the Chinese cared for coming from Europe at the same time. We parallel the Chinese desire for watches with European desire for Chinese porcelain, whose production involved a similar division of labor involving entire cities, and which circulated around the mysterious secret ingredient of Kowloon, which was bones beneath the skin or porcelain. The final work we show is mountains of gold and silver, which forms an inversely symmetrical relationship with mutual aid, as focusing on another trade issue between China and the West, and also located around another type of rare earth, namely praseodymium and neodymium, which have recently become the focus of another trade war. The materials used as a key ingredient in green technologies is also responsible for illegal rare earth mining in the exact same region in China where porcelain has been made for 2 millennia. Decomposing resonates most deeply with the season and shell. But if decomposing is understood as a process of absorption into the earth, then all the works play with the idea of recycling and changing the states of materials, whether through the process of firing porcelain that is clay dug from the ground, or the chemicals which flow into the earth in rare earth extraction. Decomposing, left to rot, cockroaches of the sea, washed up on shore. The mollusk, a million tiny proboscis, oozing across the coral beds of silent seas, the Red Sea, but actually the color of copper, dark and isolated, billions of microbial forms, taking shape, morphogenesis, becoming shell, becoming, tentacles forming as a face, emerging from calcium carbonate, moving and propelling through the sea dust, merging with other organisms, morphing and transforming again into another form, into a shell, a body without organs or mouth, sensing through the skin, attached to the side of a rock, clinging, sucking, absorbing smaller life forms, a hard, mottled exterior shell that becomes etched with the life of others. Barnacles, algae, creating a rough exterior surface which becomes armor. I wait for months, years, perhaps even millennia at the bottom of those dark seas, ... and then an agency from above, parallel, whose functions shift from fish to abalone at the behest of a bull in a china shop. Listening to those soft vowels translated into Somali that teach the art of diving with a knife, holding one's breath, pushing through the cold water, deeper and deeper. The liquid feels cool on my skin as it channels through my limbs. I'm cold, the pressure on my head, long, thin gloved hands feeling in the dark, beneath the cavities of rock and coral until it finds the source. The livelihood, the rough, round shape in the hand that resists, grab with one hand, then pries loose around the edge with another, all around the perimeter. My oxygen is running out. I cannot hold my breath for much longer, but then the suction gives way, and the abalone is released, captured, collected in a bag made of string with its protherant, then propelled up to the surface, onto the boat, back to shore, and shucked and shelled. Flecks of flesh are left in the crevices. The meat is dried to the verge of decomposition, a season in smell, the stench of death. The flecks dry too and cling to the body as does smell. Wrapped in hessian sacks, once containing camel feed and thrown onto the back of the truck. Then traveling, migrating, from port to port, Dubai, no. Because there are no abalone, no. Then Oman, oh yes, they are there. Then Race Act, and papers of origin are bribed conjured, oh yes. They come from Oman and then onwards to the fortress gates. Who dares to attempt entrance to these stone walls? Rejected, rejected, rejected. These objects that go unnamed pass through finally undisturbed, incredible movement on the back of a van. It stinks. What is this? Is it art? Who knows? Who cares? Sign the invoice. Let the museum pay. It arrives late. And they smell. The particles of rotting flesh have become pregnant. They animate the basement space, permanently mark the walls with their scents. A landlocked mountain kingdom, a land of lakes, is temporarily tarred with the scent of the sea, of the Red Sea, of decomposition, the smell of death that flows into those ornaments of time for which you are famous and reminds you of the repressed, of those silenced voices which our ears are not attuned to hear, screaming in the abyss.
Wet-Togetherness is a collaboration between e-flux and the 13th Shanghai Biennale, Bodies of Water, 水体. Curated by Andrés Jaque, Marina Otero Verzier, Lucia Pietroiusti, Filipa Ramos, and Mi, and organized and promoted by the Power Station of Art. This podcast has been edited by Jose Luis Espejo and Ruben Cole, with the sound design of Tomoko Sauvage, coordination of Roberto González García, and locutions by Yang.